to be the last in the series of 3 talks about creativity, because I think we've kind of covered the most important points. So if you're joining in right now and this is your first talk about creativity, then I'm just going to go over and recap what we've done so far. So first, we talked about the process of creativity and all the elements in which we tend to self-sabotage during that process. How our emotions get in the way, how our state of mind can stop the process from happening, how external influences play a role. So what we feed ourselves and our soul has an impact on what we create. So these are the things we talked about in week 1. In week 2, we talked about the mechanics of inspiration. That means mechanics of inspiration is from the kickoff point, is the kickoff point where we start. So the process can only be triggered by inspiration, and then the whole thing, like a snowball, begins to tumble. And we talked about that first because it is easier to find inspiration than it is to actually see the creative process through to the end. Because all you really essentially need for inspiration is to open your eyes and to take time and awareness to see things from a different perspective. So there was a few things that I suggested that you could do, mainly having to do with changing perspective on things that you see every day. That was the basic message. Exposing yourself to new influences and feeling comfortable with being a beginner. Because if you don't have the balls to be a beginner and make a fool of yourself and embrace the whole vibe of not knowing what you're doing, you're never going to feed that very important river of creativity with new input. It's not going to happen. So that was my advice for last week. So now, to kind of round this whole subject off, I would like to talk about the ego. Because the ego essentially is the controller of everything. So as we dissected the 2 different parts, the process and the kickoff, the ego stands even above those 2 things. So it's like a navigation system. When I was thinking about how to best describe the functions of the ego, I'm going to compare it to a navigation system, like a TomTom, GPS. And it controls where we go, which means it controls where we go to find inspiration. It controls the process of our creativity. So it's the most important thing that you need to get a handle on. So its purpose should be, like, you have 2 options with your ego. Either you can program your ego to serve you because it has a very vital function in your survival. It's your compass, and you need a compass to make sure you don't get lost. So it has a very vital function, but you have to keep it in check in a certain way, because it also has the power to make you its bitch. It can control you, and it can, if you're not careful, it can steer you in a direction that will make not only your creative life, but life in general, your relationships, difficult if it's not taken care of. So maybe some of you know the iceberg model that Freud depicted. I'm not a huge fan of Freud, but I think it's a good example as to imagine how the ego works. So if you imagine the iceberg, most of it, 90% of the iceberg is underwater. And it has this big solid base. It's full of volume. There's loads of it that's underneath the water. And then above the water, there's that tiny little tip. Now that's the part that is in our consciousness. So the ego, compared to the things that we've talked about before, the ego is in your head, which is a good thing, because when we were talking about the process and accessing things that are subconscious, kind of digging up old experiences, or even reframing how we see things, it has a lot to do with emotion. And it's not accessible at every given time. So it's a more fragile, kind of difficult thing to grab onto. Whereas the ego is in the part of our consciousness that we use most. Most of us are very present in our heads. So it's easier for us to take things that happen on our conscious level and work with it. That is the absolute positive with it. So it defines everything. The ego defines and encompasses like everything that you believe yourself to be, right? So it kind of is the whole package that stops with the skin, that sets you apart from your environment, from other people, and other people will see the tip of the iceberg also, maybe from a different perspective. So you have two sides of this coin, because you have a certain image of who you are. Other people will take maybe some of the things that you think you are and build it into their reality, but they also may have a very diverse idea of who you are as a person, and those two things may not match. So the ego is born at the age of about 2, when, that's why they call the terrible twos, when we discover the word no. Like, finally, we can influence other people's lives. But if you've ever seen a mother with a 2-year-old in a supermarket, like, finally this small little creature who is just discovering life can make grown people reduce to tears. Like, they can make people have meltdowns, they can make life difficult, but they discover that they have influence on the world. They have influence on people that are 5 times their size at this point. So that's where the ego was born. When you realize that apart from the consciousness and the experiences your parents are giving you, you have your own. So that's where it starts. But then, as you keep saying no all the time, at some point you'll get punished, probably, because you'll get into a lot of trouble and there'll be consequences, and parents explain to you how things work, that you can't do certain things. As much as you want to say no, at that age, they just grab you by the collar and put you in the car if you're misbehaving. So as much as you start to understand that your will and your ideal of what you want to do and be has an impact on the world, you also understand that everything that you do also has consequences. And it's at that point that you start to navigate. So before you do something, the consciousness kicks in now, of course, with the growing age. By the age of 5, you pretty much have your solid framework already of basic framework. You know, the ego is something that is very fluid. So you will always, during your lifetime, there will always be coming and going, reframing, reassessing. But by the age of 5, you'll have your first kind of idea of how the whole system works. Then the layers start to come on, and you have to figure out
what is worth saying no to. You start to consider, okay, what's going to happen to me if I don't comply with certain things? And this process is something that you keep refining over age, but it stays with you. There's no chance of going back to that state, or it takes a lot of work to get back to that state. So I like to consider this whole process like risk management, because now your ego, you can portray yourself, it's your outside image to people, so it offers you protection. It's very, very important for you. If you don't want to make yourself vulnerable, you know how to use the tools that your ego has discovered to protect yourself. If people offer their opinion without you wanting it, you can defend it. This is the good side of your ego. Not only will it tell you where it's advantageous for you to navigate or not navigate, it can also protect you. Okay? So if you go back to thinking of the ego as a tom-tom, right? Just imagine yourself being the programmer. Like, it's not the automated version that just does updates on its own. You really program your navigation system, which means it comes with a set of maps. Like, these maps are the ones that your parents have already learned from their parents. So the basic maps are there, but you can decide and look at that map which areas aren't valid anymore. Maps change from year to year, from week to week. Some new developments are added, some streets don't exist anymore. And for you to have that accurate navigation, that's what you have to keep doing. You have to keep assessing the information that you give yourself, that has been handed down to you, and that you will always receive from the outside world. And you decide, is this useful to me? Is this what I need to navigate? Or is this just going to get me confused and lost? And it's all in your control. You program it, you decide, you do your research, what to keep and what to ditch. So, what the ego is all in your head. You create a person or a role for yourself that you would like to be. It's a belief system, and it is very subjective. From the inside of your ego, it feels completely real. Everything feels solid. But at the same time, so does that guy's and that guy's and this woman's. From the inside, they may conflict in a million ways. So what we think of ourselves is a very, very subjective form of reality. But because it's in our heads and we can grasp it with logic and intelligence, we can change it. So, what also is often mentioned in connection with the ego is the self. So I just wanted to kind of differentiate the two things. Whereas the ego is predominantly the mental and conscious version of us, the self is the whole iceberg. So it encompasses our experience, our subconscious, the spirituality, the whole thing. The whole thing is ourself, as what we would consider ourself, right? But the ego is the gatekeeper of the whole self. And it decides, it filters which elements of the whole bundle of what we are allowed to come into the image part for ourselves and for other people. So if you think, just to go back to this reality of how we we see ourselves. I don't know, ladies, have you ever been in a store? Like, just come with me on this journey and just think about this experience for a minute. You wake up in the morning, you're out shopping, you feel great about yourself, you've worked out, you've had healthy meals, you feel on top of the world, right? So you think, cool, I'm going to get this new dress because I just deserve it. I just deserve it. And then you get into these changing rooms with these horrible neon lights and these sometimes really distorted mirrors. And you look at yourself and you think, oh my God, take your clothes off and you think, holy shit, do I really look like this? This morning I felt fine, but I hadn't seen this yet, you know? I don't understand why stores do that, because it is the most deflating thing and it totally takes your mind off buying that garment because you feel like shit. So in the morning, when you are feeling fine, what's the difference? Because in your head, you were feeling fantastic. You were fantastic. But then you saw that, which is actually a combination of artificial light, distorted mirrors, and all of a sudden, your perception and your mood and the whole zest you had in the morning is totally wiped out. That's the ego. That's what the ego can do to you. That's a very small example. But the same thing happens. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this. Sometimes somebody will describe you or describe you to a third person who doesn't know you, and they will relay the information that was given to them about you by somebody else. And sometimes you think, wow, I do not see myself like that. It doesn't even have to be negative, but sometimes the way people perceive you by this image you reflect to the outside world that you have chosen for yourself is surprising as to how it's perceived, because you know inside, no, that doesn't resonate with me. So now the ego kicks in, right? Because you're in a conflict situation now. You're at a crossroad because your self-belief and somebody else's perception of you don't match. It's what we talked about at the beginning. Now is the crucial point, because you have 3 roads in front of you. Either you choose, or the ego offers you, the road of superiority, which means you can elevate yourself above that person and say, they're full of shit. They don't know what they're talking about. They're saying that about me because they have issues. That's how they are. So you put yourself in a position of being superior to that person, which is a mechanism that you can use to totally discredit what they say. So either you mirror, you project, or you just flat out call them a liar. That's what the ego can do. This is the one road you can go down. The other road the ego can take you down is feeling inferior. So instead of putting yourself above what the person said and putting them down, you feel so intimidated, like in this mirror situation. You feel so deflated that you, instead of assessing this information or checking if you feel the same, if you can use that information in your navigation system, you just take it full on and leave yourself to be overwhelmed and sad about how this person misrepresented you to somebody else, how they don't understand who you are. You can feel sad and deflated about it. So These are two roads that the ego will offer you instantly, right? What we want is the road that goes down the middle. And that's the road where you introspect. So what you do is you take that piece of information, you just zen into your own head for a minute, and you think about it with logic. Okay, for example, why did that person say something like that about you? Maybe you remember a situation or a conversation you had where you can logically maybe understand why they came to that conclusion. So there are rational ways of picking it apart. Essentially, is that piece of information or is that situation so important to you? Does it change the view of yourself? Or is it just one of those things that has passed through the filter that you have neutralized and keep your ego in balance? Now that is the key that we want to achieve. These two opposites of inferior and superior will be handed to you automatically. So it will be like people pulling on your arms. The superior will be on one side, the inferior on the other side, and you have to resist going into extremes and to find that middle road where you can say, no, actually, well, who cares? You know, that's the place we want to be in. Is this information useful for you? What are you going to create out of this information that you've been given? If it's of no use to you, discard it. Get rid of it. So how do you achieve that state to have that balance? Because on one day you will feel good about yourself. On the other day you won't. So resisting the temptation to be naturally pulled to one side is not going to be as easy every single day, right? So what we have to use is our ultimate superpower, which is judgment. And the amount of times where I've heard people say, oh, I don't judge anybody. Like, what, really? You don't have sharp teeth. You don't have claws. And you can't run fast if somebody's trying to eat you. As humans, don't be fooled. Judgment is the only thing we have to survive. And we judge everything, everybody, in every second and every minute of our lives, because that is how we spot danger. By judging a situation or a person, we can understand and perceive if they're up to no good, if they want to harm us. The same goes for situations in our lives. So don't feel bad about judging. You don't have to be nasty to people. This is not what I'm suggesting, but you judge. That's how. And if you have a sound judgment, if you practice the skill of sound judgment, it is the most important thing you can do. It will keep you safe. So the next thing is the pitfall of seeking approval. Like, this is something I one day I will probably find the key element as to why it's often women that fall prey to this more than men do. But seeking approval is something that will cause you a lot of trouble. If you are the kind of person that needs approval so that you feel that whatever you would like to do has a value, then that is something you have to investigate. Because you are enough as you are right now. And anything that you feel about yourself that makes you uneasy or makes you believe that you could be more than you are right now, get on it, change it, do something about it. Don't be the victim. And seeking approval means that you give away your power. Never give away your power to anybody. So, your navigation system is custom made. It goes to serve you. That has to be really clear in your head. It's an aid to get what you want. You are not enslaved to it. So seeking approval, like when you think about how many people, when you look at social media, for example, and topics that are maybe not that popular, like politics right now, or I've noticed a lot with many conspiracy theories that are going around like right now, how people's opinion gravitates toward the popular. Even if somebody is bringing things up that are actually quite logical or maybe useful, public opinion is very important. So the mass of people will conform to whatever the public opinion is because they don't want to be judged either. Keep that in mind when you're seeking approval. It may look to you like everybody has a different opinion or everybody is against what you're doing. My guess and my observation is that there's a small percentage of people who actually have that opinion and a large percentage of people that will just follow whatever the popular opinion is at the time. So keep that in mind. Actually, in essence, if you break it down, maybe there's not that many people who think differently to you. They just may not be courageous enough to say it out loud. When I was at university, we did an experiment which comes from psychology. And what you do is there are two lines on the blackboard. They are exactly the same length. One of the two lines has two horizontal lines like an I, like an old capital I. The other one is just straight up and down. So what happens in this experiment is 5 people from a class of maybe 20 are asked to leave the room. In the meantime, the ones remaining in the class are told whatever the person who is separated from the group guesses, which is the longer line, their job is collectively to change their opinion. So what happens is, the unsuspected person that is outside of the class has no idea what's going on. So imagine the situation. You're removed from the class for 10 minutes. You come back in, you sit down, and you see these two lines, line A and line B. So the teacher asks you, which line is longer? And you say, well, to me, they look the same. Few people in the class, and the class gets asked collectively, who thinks that line A and line B are the same? And quite a few people put their hand up. So you feel, okay, some people don't agree with me, but X amount of people do. So you feel comfortable with your choice. So the teacher says, look again. I'll give you 5 minutes to really look, and then we'll take a new vote. You still think, your instinct, your eyes, your whole perception is saying the lines are the same length. But now people are starting to change their opinion. Not as many people are think the same anymore. Now people are starting to think they're two different lengths. Up until the point where you are the only one still thinking that these two lines are the same length, right? The experiment has followed the following route. As obvious as it is that there is no difference between the length of these two lines, the less people back up your opinion, the more you start to doubt yourself automatically. You can see with your eyes, your logic is telling you, where's the difference? They're the same length. But don't underestimate the impact that it has when there's a mass of people saying something different. It makes you insecure. The next thing I want to talk about, the next ego buster, is making comparisons. When we look at other people, we judge them, and often we compare ourselves. We compare our looks, we compare our success, we compare what we see of them to what we feel of us. Now this is where shit goes wrong, okay? When you are in your own ego, even though it's in your head and you have a solid persona to the outside world, you know that sometimes you have bad days. You know that the confidence that you may be able to muster now and then isn't always how you feel. But to keep up appearances, you create the smoke screen. Because being perceived, having that weakness open for other people to see, makes you vulnerable. And we don't always want to be vulnerable. We don't always want to cry in public. We don't want people to know that we're having a shit day. So what we do is create this smoke screen. But when we compare ourselves to other people, we often make the mistake of forgetting that they have a smoke screen too. So what we are comparing ourselves to, we are comparing our inside emotions, our sometimes insecurities, to something that may look perfect from the outside to you. And that is something that you should really, really avoid doing, because it doesn't serve you. It really doesn't serve you. And you have no idea of the circumstances of that other person. If you look at the smoke screen, or the one you create yourself, or the one ones other people create, it's photoshopped. It's not the reality of how life is. So I want to give you an example of this, like with the whole corona thing going on. One of my friends sent me a voice message saying how bad she feels because I lost my job a few weeks ago, and she was feeling bad for having moments of feeling hopeless because she didn't know how things were going to continue. We all don't know what's going to happen. So she was having a bad corona day, but she felt guilty because she compared herself to me, thinking my situation was worse than hers, and making the assumption that I was just sailing through all this. So I thought that's so weird, because being in my perspective, since this whole situation, the whole corona craze started, I have had at least 3 massive meltdowns where I have had days of really not understanding how I was going to be able to cope with the changes in our personal life. One day I was very concerned with the global scale of things. So I wondered, how can this be so obvious to me and so alien to somebody else? And so I wrote back saying, well, what makes you think that I don't have the same issues, or that I'm above this, which I'm absolutely not? And then she answered and said, because when we were teenagers, like we went to high school together, I never saw you cry, because everything was always so easy to you. The fact is that when I was a teenager, I was living in a situation where there was a lot of shit going on that I had to protect against. So my safest bet was to play the tough guy, because that would make sure that I was less vulnerable to being attacked or laying myself open to other people. So that's a classical example of how if you take these smoke screens as absolute reality, how you can get yourself in a whirl of fiction, essentially. So my protective system from years and years ago translated to her as a grown-up woman feeling bad about herself because of something that was still in her mind, in her ego, about comparing herself to my persona. So get rid of that. Get rid of that. Be very conscious of other people have shit going on too. Okay. The other thing is as well with making comparisons, which I find very, very dangerous, is with these Instagram pictures and young girls. For example, if you think about young girls growing up and comparing themselves, when you get up in the morning, you know, if you think about a teenage kid, they grab their phone in the morning, they flick through their Instagram feed, and they see all these beautiful girls with the perfect makeup, the perfect hair, the perfect clothes. And then they go in the bathroom and they see their bedhead, they see the image of themselves in the mirror, all sleepy and bug-eyed. They don't look like those Instagram chicks. But forgetting that these Instagram chicks probably took 60 pictures and had a full-on 1 hour makeover and combed their hair and positioned themselves in 15 different angles to create that one perfect picture. So I think it's really, really important to give yourself this constant reality check every now and then. People are not better than you. Whatever you want to do, you can go out there and do it. So, coming to the last point now. Comparing yourself makes you feel self-conscious. So, self-consciousness is when you shift from the positive awareness that we talked about before, when we were speaking about inspiration, focusing your attention on something as to open a new channel is positive. But if awareness becomes a self-consciousness, then it's out of proportion. Your focus is so inside yourself that the proportions become distorted. It's like when you cook and you have that perfect meal, and then you drop the salt cellar into the pot, and it's just too much. The meal's ruined, you can forget it. You're not as important to other people from a microscopic view as you think you are. Like, there was one situation where I fell flat on my face because of, dancing on ice, literally dancing on ice. And I was so ashamed. I thought, oh my God, I just feel so crappy. I've totally humiliated myself, just to realize that nobody was looking. There were 5 people around. One woman was so conscious about getting her hair right because she was not feeling good with her hair. The other guy was dipping into his bag. We sometimes have this perception that we get judged like we judge ourselves. Mostly people are so busy with their own shit that they're not even looking. Keep that in mind. The other thing is that, of course, there are some people that will give you negative feedback. Maybe that one guy who was dipping into his briefcase was looking up in that moment coincidentally and laughed his ass off. Fine. Yeah, if you can laugh about yourself, and let things go, even if somebody's really nasty. You know, sometimes people are extremely nasty about your choices, about your outfits, about whatever you do in life. But keep in mind that that is something where they have been at a crossroad. They have gotten input from you and decided to be superior, which we've talked about now. Superior and inferior are bad responses. So they have an issue with their own ego. It's not you. Sometimes it does feel like it is you, but a lot of the times when people give negative feedback, there is something going on with them, that they need you as a scapegoat to feel better about themselves. Becoming more aware that it may not be you, it may be them, can separate you from taking on those negative things that they're trying to put on you. If you do not falling into the trap of self-consciousness, and if you are too scared of other people's judgment, you will never create anything. What you do will not look good. A lot of what you do will not look good. If you would be in one of Picasso's workshops, I'm sure there would be a lot of crap standing around that just didn't make the mark. Experiments, sketches that didn't go well, that have just been tossed into the corner. All you see is the grand paintings that have made it, but there's a lot of shit that doesn't make it. So if you are trying to be perfect off the hop, and if you are scared of somebody saying, what is that? You will never have the courage to create. Keep in mind and remember that the creative process is not linear. It's always fluctuating. So something that you were totally in tune with yesterday, you may look at today and think, that's totally incomplete, or it's not what I was going for. You will not like everything equally each day. Put it to one side. In 2 weeks, when you look at it again, you'll think, wow, okay, cool. Now I have a new idea as to how to work with it. It's not the same every time. Not everybody is going to like what you like. Not everybody is going to appreciate the effort of what you have put into something, that soul work. Don't let yourself be distracted from finding your voice just because your ego is hurt by somebody not giving you that confirmation that you need. You have to make sure that you don't need that confirmation. It's nice to have, but if you get to that point where it may stop you from trying, you have to learn to appreciate yourself. If you like it, that's enough. That is absolutely enough. Who do you have something to prove to apart from yourself? Okay. Never stop trying. Never ever stop trying, because your ego, everything that is underneath the ocean, all this iceberg that is screaming to get out, that we need for the creative process, is it transfers from the head to the heart. But your ego is at the border control, saying, okay, which part of all this in-depth stuff am I going to let pass to the conscious level? Keep going, because the more the ego learns that letting a little bit of vulnerability into the consciousness and not feeling wounded so fast, the more you will expand on that creativity, the more access you are going to have to it. So, if you want to see people who are not ego-driven, observe a child under the age of 4. They don't care about running around naked, rolling around in dirt. If they want to cry, they're going to cry. If they're angry, they're angry. They haven't learned to disguise that yet. And that's kind of the state that you want to train yourself, not that you run around naked in the mud, but get elements of that back to be able to have the neutrality in your ego, to not make it a hindrance for you. The other people that are absolutely inspiring and hilarious are old people, because they are on the other spectrum of the whole story of life. They've lived their life, they've had their kids, they've had their careers. They don't give a anymore. They know they have a limited amount of time on this earth, and it's like, if you've ever watched this person, some of the interaction of people in an old age home, it is hilarious how they just are so authentic. Because what are you going to spend the last years of your life trying to prove something? No, you're going to do whatever the hell it is you feel like and screw everybody. So very inspirational and very naughty, by the way. Things that go on in old age homes and care homes. Pwah. So 10 minutes we still have. How do we do it? Like, how do we really get a handle on these bad habits that we have that can pull us away from this straight and neutral ego, balanced ego that we really need to be good creators? Become aware of your bad habits. If you feel envy or jealousy, if you're starting to tilt into inferior or superior behaviors, stop yourself and figure out what it is that has got you by the balls, and try and uproot it. Take it away, because you are giving away your power. Think about this all the time. As soon as you tip into an imbalance, you are just handing it to somebody else. Never, ever do that. Embrace the fluctuation. Embrace the fluctuation of your own state. Your ego is going to be great one day, things can happen, and the next day it's not so great. It will give you good and bad feedback. So embrace it. As you move along with this navigation of it, there will be grieving moments. Take the time to embrace that too. It's like shedding skin. As you say goodbye to something, there is a certain amount of grief and a certain amount of uneasiness towards the new. That's all part of it. Just be cool with that and let it go. If you're sad today, you can celebrate tomorrow. It's fine. Your ego is there so you can survive and prosper. It can be your friend. It does not have to be something that enslaves you. And as you practice having your balance in your ego, your creative identity will just grow and grow and grow, step by step, baby steps here. The smoke screen that you need to protect yourself will automatically be less needed, because in the moment where your identity is becoming more and more vibrant, that shield of protection is not as necessary anymore, because you are living your truth. And that is the ultimate thing you want to find. Find your voice. Live your truth. Break through the discomfort that belongs to all of that. Tune out the voices that are telling you that you're not going the right way, that what you're doing is not cool. Love yourself. Be kind. Be kind to every part of what you do. Even the parts you don't like. The judgment we have towards ourselves is sometimes so crushing. The way we come down hard on what we expect from ourselves. And this is without what everybody else expects. So be kind to yourself. If you're kind to yourself and you love yourself, you can be kind to other people. And that way, we're going to create a better world for everybody. Be happy. Find your truth, live your truth, because that will make you happy. And in the state of happiness, you don't even think of separatism. You don't think of protection. You melt into the experience because you just feel so safe. You feel so elated. Go with it. Be happy as much as you can. Figure out what it is that you love most and do more of it. To finish off with, I want to tell you a little story of 2 seeds that were planted by a farmer. Now, put yourself in the consciousness of one of these seeds. It's dark. There's dirt all around. So this one seed is thinking, actually, I could grow. But there's a seed right next to me. If I grow, I'm going to have to break my shield. That means I'll be the only one who doesn't have a shield. What if that guy grows faster than me? What if on the top of the soil there are so many other plants that are better than me? What if I can't take back what I've done because I've broken my shell? I've exceeded the boundaries. I don't know what's going to happen on top of the soil because I've never been there. The other seed thinks, this is dark. This is dirty. I'll just go for it. And he grows and expands and hits the sunshine. Well, he's turned into a really big plant that is exchanging communication with all the other plants on the field, has its nose towards the sun. The other seed is still in the ground, thinking, should I grow? Now that guy's grown already. I'm a piece of shit. I didn't break my shell. Now it's too late. What am I going to do? In his self-pity and self-doubt, one day he sees this huge triangular thing coming towards him. A chicken passed by the road and saw that there was a seed lying there that hadn't blossomed into anything. And that's how he gets chewed alive. Do not be chewed alive by a chicken. You go for it. You may not grow as fast as other people. You may not be the largest plant, but make sure you have your nose towards the sun.